Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, so this video I'd like to be the first in a series. Hopefully, I can do, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or even more videos. A series on basically looking at the Rockford Files. Okay, one of my favorite TV shows, and I think one of the best TV shows from the 1970s. Sort of looking at the show from kind of a spiritual perspective and sort of just seeing what we can gather and what we can, how we can be sort of inspired, I think, and even illuminated by, I think, just the genius and just the wizardry of this very special TV show. I think, I think we need to be careful not to just dismiss things like television as just mere TV shows. I think occasionally, as I think we're aware from having seen Breaking Bad and maybe some other very special TV shows. Occasionally, there's just so much genius that comes together in producing a TV show between just incredibly good writers and very good actors that occasionally you get real illuminations, you get real insights, and sometimes even just the magic of human genius sometimes shows up in a TV show in a way that I think we can look at it not as like oh my gosh, I mean we're just going to be fully enlightened by a TV show, but just as little showcases of how I guess the magic of human genius, when it does sort of show up in certain artistic expression. Sometimes artistic expression can provide us just a glimpse of very special insight, that can be very helpful, I think, to people that are just trying to survive in the world and maybe trying to sort out their personal problems and even developing maybe useful values and orientation in life. So, I look at, I'm not afraid to look at television as an example of the literary arts or the dramatic arts. It is one medium in which occasionally you find something amazing, just like, the works of Shakespeare. The works of Shakespeare really fall into the dramatic arts, and at the time, Shakespeare was just basically running a troupe of actors and basically presenting entertainment at the time. So I mean, we have to be very clear. Shakespeare was not at the time undertaking in his time. He wasn't undertaking to produce masterworks of genius. He was undertaking to entertain people in his period. And so likewise, with television, just like with the theater or with movies, it's the primary, I guess the primary, or even like say take Beethoven or Mozart or Bach. These people who were essentially trying to provide musical entertainment, or musical inspiration, for like say, and so I guess Johannes Bach wrote music a lot for churches, so it had sort of a liturgical, significance. But basically, it was just to provide a sort of a soundtrack, and in a sense, that is kind of entertainment, Um, and I'm sure that many of the masterworks, supposedly of Beethoven or Mozart, were designed basically to entertain people in concerts. So it's not like these people are trying to design like the tablets coming down from the Mount Sinai, whatever. I think it's just genius has a way of expressing itself even in things that are designed as entertainment. Likewise, look at people like the great people like Miles Davis, or the great jazz artists. They're not sitting there trying to produce like per se. They're not trying to produce like great. They're not trying to like make you enlightened. Their job is basically to produce great music. And sometimes I guess the magic of genius is that even though the purpose is to entertain, geniuses through art will sometimes have such richness in the content and in the way they present their expression, that it does provide us with a lot of, I think, I guess just the magic of genius. And it's kind of hard to explain that, but occasionally what you'll see with the magic of great genius as expressed in art, whether in music or dramatic arts, is sometimes great insight. And I think the Rockford Files to me is one of the great, I think, masterworks of I would say genius in the dramatic arts that I've seen from the late 20th century. Okay, now obviously the Rockford Files has a lot of heritage, Basically, you cannot divorce the Rockford Files from the heritage started by Raymond Chandler. Raymond Chandler, basically a special type of detective fiction, very realistic, also a little bit surreal. Okay, this is very important. Sometimes you can highlight realism through very, I think, I guess, very stereotyped characters, so stereotyped that they're not really people, and they're sort of beyond people. They're sort of beyond character, but that helps. That's a device that helps provide vision to present the world as it is. So sometimes, a great writer can use the artifice of a kind of an unreal character, especially a main character, as a way of sort of highlighting and showcasing the world as it is. And so, basically, I think the sort of the gritty, hard-boiled realism, I think of the Southern California of Raymond Chandler. Southern California was basically the sort of the setting for Raymond Chandler's hard-boiled detective fiction. Basically, that is kind of the inherited sort of setting in which the Rockford Files sort of presents itself, I guess, but through the light of the 1970s. Okay, so before we even get into James Garner and Rockford himself as the main character, we already see that we're bringing in sort of this inheritance of the Raymond Chandler Southern California, and at the same time sort of fusing it with the very special light and the very special brightness and sunshininess of the 1970s. Another thing about the 1970s that's very important is the 1970s had a different pace of time. The 1970s was a more of a hush puppy. I say hush puppy; those shoes are very soft. It was very fresh water. It was very sort of non-venomous, non-poisonous. It was sort of the green snake of the decades. Very very sunshiny, very laid back, very low glamour, very patient, lots of time, no sense of hurry, basically. And so. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't people who didn't have a hurried, busy life in the 1970s, but the atmosphere of the 70s was one of a lot of time, a lot of abundance of time, so that you perceive time differently in the 70s. It was very kind of just sunshine and eternity, kind of in the sort of a sense of eternity in the sunshine, basically, and a very open atmosphere. And I think Southern California is a fantastic sort of vehicle, sort of a vehicle in terms of the setting to present sort of the sunlight of the 70s. And so that's a very special sort of environment in which to have kind of this reverberation of the light of eternity as the setting in which to see characters play out sort of in the Raymond Chandler, sort of in the heritage of Raymond Chandler. Okay. So that's before we even bring in other elements. All right. But right now we can already see that just in presenting the setting for the Rockford Files, we already have a very complex sort of a fusion of, the special light and the special space and time of the 1970s. Okay. Combined with sort of this amazing heritage of a fantastic, detective fiction genius, Raymond Chandler. So we're already fusing before we even get started. Then comes the main character, which is James Rockford, Jimbo, Sonny, whatever. He has different names, but basically, or Jimmy. He has so many names. He's Jimbo, Jimmy, Jim, Sonny, James Rockford. Okay, and basically, James Rockford is without a doubt. Okay, as a character, he is so stereotyped. Okay, and he is so kind of, I guess, sketched, I guess, into like almost a superhuman profile that you can almost say that he's not a real person. Okay, so he's not a character that you could call a real person, and I'll explain what I mean by that. He's sort of beyond a regular human being, and it's done so intentionally and so obviously that I think subconsciously, as you're watching him, you're not processing Jim Rockford as a real person. Okay, you're processing him as a kind of a stylized, stereotyped, sort of like a kind of a archetype or a type, not as a person. Okay, so that spiritually is very important because it sort of reminds us as people, okay, that at the level of people, okay, the actual spirits of the world and the actual paradigms of personality are sort of beyond any individual. Okay, so that's very important because it sort of sets what is kind of like for the Greeks. The Greeks had sort of their gods, sort of these sort of like superhuman, supernatural kind of figures. Okay, and in a sense, Jim Rockford is a sort of a supernatural, kind of an abstracted, superhuman, not a real person, sort of a type, an archetype. Okay, and I think it's interesting how a good writer of television fiction is not afraid to over stylize certain characters to be more than human. Okay, because I think we understand that in the spirit language, in the language of the human spirituality, okay, we are able to process and understand people that we fully understand to be sort of beyond human and sort of abstracted beyond what is a realistic human being. So we already understand that in the alphabet and in the kind of like the grammar or the syntax of spiritual character, that the actual elements that move us in the world are often beyond human, sort of superhuman, supernatural in that sense. Okay, so Jim Rockford as a character is intentionally designed not to confuse anybody with a regular person. All right, and so how do they do that? First of all, they do a couple of things that are very special. Okay, and by the way, other TV shows do this as well. Okay, so let's not just limit. This is not only limited to the Rockford Files, but in the case of Jim Rockford in the Rockford Files, the way that they sort of establish that he's not just a person, that he's sort of a superhuman archetype, like a stereotype. Okay, is first of all, where does he live? Okay, does he live in a trailer park? Okay, well, how do you answer that? He lives in a trailer. Okay, he lives in a trailer, but he doesn't live in a trailer park. Okay, he doesn't live in a bad neighborhood. He lives in Malibu on the beach. Okay, basically he doesn't live anywhere. He just lives on the beach, like in this nice, almost like one of the most, I would say, inaccessible, one of the most economically inaccessible parts of Southern California, where billionaires live, basically, in the richest part and the most kind of inaccessible part of Southern California, basically in this strip of just like everybody's beach, sort of the beach of eternity, so to speak, is just this one trailer just sitting there by itself, and that's just Jim Rockford's trailer. So already you can see that it's sort of, there is in no realistic way would any person be able to put their trailer just in the middle of a very high, I guess, how would you say, like a high value beach, like, super high value beach property in Southern California. And basically he just has this trailer by himself, and in a sense, you can almost say that he is sort of the inhabitant of the beach, sort of the beach, like abstracted from any beach. You know what I mean? It's sort of like the beach of California, the beach of Southern California. He just lives, and he's the only trailer basically on the beach, as far as, how would you say, like at the soul level, you perceive it as, he has no neighbors. He is just Southern California's beach, and he is the trailer on the beach. So right there, that is clearly a device to make it very clear to our souls that he's just a fictional character, but overtly, obviously, unmistakably a fictional character. It's not a real person, and they underline it. So he sort of has this impossible living situation where he just has this trailer just on the beach. How does he get his plumbing? How does he get his electric? They don't have to mess with trying to make that too real, because they want to make his character sort of like almost, I would say, a supernatural character. It's not a real character. You're in the dream world now. You're in the world of character archetypes, and they allow that, and they don't try to fix the loose ends of the realism there, because in terms of character, they want him to be sort of this unreal character. And that is, in a way, a little bit similar to what they've done, to what Raymond Chandler did with his main character. And basically, the main how would you say, the main detective character in the Raymond Chandler books. And by the way, I have a terrible memory. I have these weird memory problems where I have these obvious things that I can't get off my tongue. I can't remember right now the name of the the main detective. I've read all the Raymond Chandler books, and I just got it on the tip of my tongue. But just let's just say that sort of the Jim Rockford, basically, of the Raymond Chandler books, also had a little bit of an unreal. He was designed specifically to be not a real person, sort of too abstracted, too archetypal to be an actual person. And the way they did that was the way Raymond Chandler achieved that was he didn't put him on a trailer on the beach, but he made him an impossibly lonely character, in the sense that he is a person who had basically no friends, who had no girlfriends, who had no like connection. He was just this independent, this impossibly independent person who just had this kind of monk-like, very simple apartment, and just went around Los Angeles, basically just giving his life, to the pursuit of solving mysteries, basically, and just getting beat up all the time, and clearly not a real person, because he didn't have the defining features that complete the elements of a real person, like having, like, say, real friends, or having, like, say, a real relationship with somebody. It's a person who just was clearly designed as an artistic device, as an archetype. Okay, and likewise with Jim Rockford, he has friendly relationships with people, in the sense that he has friendly contacts with people. Okay, but he doesn't really have any relationships, even with his father. His father sort of comes in sort of in these like dramatic vignettes where they have these encounters and some comedy, sort of comical humorous interplay, but in a sense they're just kind of like disembodied characters, just kind of interacting. They don't really have the full features of a full father-son relationship. So in other words, it's clear that what they're doing with Jim Rockford is they're making him sort of on purpose kind of just an abstracted, sort of archetypal sort of character, as opposed to a real person. Okay, and I think that's a device they use to give him some altitude, so that we're not confusing him with the real person, so that he can be sort of superhuman in his observations, in his sarcasm, in his humor, and he becomes sort of a commentary and a parody. No, sort of a commentary, not a parody, but sort of a commentary, and sort of a critique and a vision on the types of characters that you might see in the real world. Okay. And so basically, Jim Rockford is sort of used almost as a narrative device to allow a vision. And vision can only come from above. Vision can only come from something that's beyond a particular personality or a particular individual human being. So it's sort of an above human, above any normal individual sort of vision that allows us to have kind of interesting commentary, kind of sarcastic, kind of, I would say, a little bit cynical sort of commentary on different types of actual people. So what they've done with the Rockford Files, through the main character of James Rockford, and basically, using the sort of the setting of Raymond Chandler's hard-boiled Southern California, and also just the special light of the 70s, okay, is they've created sort of an environment in which we can now sort of take in different spiritual possibilities, different spiritual types of characters, okay, and we're going to have sort of like almost like room for vision and critique, and putting people in their place, even ridiculizing different characters. And so it's a wonderful space to sort of take things that might otherwise intimidate us, like, say, like mafia figures or criminal type figures, or like, say, police authority figures that normally we'd be like, oh, wow, that's a police authority. But here we have this altitude where we can sort of point out the ridiculousness of every different type that we might run into. And I think that position in which we can ridiculize and see things in their ridiculousness, in other words, is putting in perspective, different possibilities of personality that we could have in the world. And we're now opening spirituality to the vision above personality, okay, above specific characters, so that normally those of us who suffer with personality disorders or issues, maybe just shortcomings in life, often we operate under the spiritual myopia, where for us, the biggest thing in the universe are specific personalities. And we think that personalities are sort of like the highest mountain that you can reach in the universe. And when you have perspective to see personalities, all personalities, including the most narcissistic or the most arrogant or the most whatever, even someone like say Donald Trump, is just a personality. It's just a cockroach basically from that altitude, and you can see in each little cockroach or in each little bed bug, you can see sort of the foibles and the imperfections and the ridiculousness, and then that's the perspective. That's healthy perspective. That with the right devices and the right distance and the right perspective and the right abstraction level, we can start to see in perspective the normally intimidating world of personalities. We can now see personalities in a perspective where we see how ridiculous they are, and ridiculousness and perspective are they sort of go hand in hand. And so basically, what we see in the Rockford Files is basically a gallery of humanity, okay, through this perspective of Jim, who's sort of abstracted out beyond the human, and sort of the environment of Ray Chandler's Southern California, and just the special light of the 70s. And in that gallery, in that space, in that setting, we see the presentation of different personality possibilities, okay, all the things that would normally intimidate us in real life. And so, for example, we see people like Dennis Becker. Becker is like a detective in the LAPD, and basically he's just an old friend of Jim, and he calls him Jimbo, and they have this relationship. But because Jim gets a lot of information from Becker, and they have this friendship, that really irritates this lieutenant who's called Chapman. Okay, and he's really irritated how Rockford has this great friendship with Becker, and he's able to extract all these resources from the police force. And basically, Chapman is kind of like, who do you think you are coming here, getting all this information and basically using our system, whatever. So he's very, let's say, not very happy with Jim Rockford, and kind of looking down on him as this poor cheapskate detective or whatever. But because we have all these perspectives in the setting of the Rockford Files, we can see Chapman also as kind of this like real arrogant sort of institutional figure who, I don't know, he is a very tough guy, and he's kind of like big city smart or whatever. But you can see how the actual apparatus of the Rockford Files provides such a perspective that even someone like Chapman is sort of rendered small, so that you can actually ridiculize him as well. Okay, like maybe taking himself too seriously, maybe taking the authoritarian attitude around the police, like around police authority, to maybe being too stuffy in his authoritarian arrogance or grandiosity, whatever. So in a sense, the apparatus of the Rockford Files, of the setting, is so big that even somebody like Becker is really truly, I'm sorry, not Becker, but Chapman. Chapman is kind of the institutional, he represents the institution of the police. He himself is rendered small, and even the institution and the bureaucracy of the police is rendered small. So we can see the pettiness and the ridiculousness even of a whole institution. And it's just a reminder to us how important it is, the spiritual aspect of perspective and distance, not just seeing the highest mountains in particular personalities, but seeing that whole perspective of what we might call creation itself. Okay, and I say creation itself because I think as we pan out in terms of our setting, the setting in which we place characters. Okay, we have the sunshine, we have time and space, we have sunshine, light, illumination, perspective, all those things. I think at that point spiritually we're beyond individual characters, and that's the setting for characters. But it also is, I think, a reminder of a deep part in our souls where we relate to the whole universe, basically the whole presentation of light itself, of space itself, of, let's say, like very long, very large landscape, like landscape to the horizon, basically. And when we have landscape to the horizon, in a sense of panning out over the world itself, like mountaintop vision, basically, like mountaintop vision, you have the sense of, I think, almost creation, without getting religious, because I don't think spirituality is religious, but without getting religious, I think those of us who live beyond personalities, okay, those of us who enjoy, let's say, the wilderness, who enjoy the mountaintop vision, who enjoy the world as a tremendous landscape, okay, I think we can be very sensitive to see the miracle of creation, okay, the miracle of creation itself, where if we're very sensitive, those of us who've been sensitive, we could marvel at even insects, small animals, plants, flowers, and just the miracle of every tiny aspect of creation, okay, the atmosphere itself, the clouds, the stars at night, um, seeing and understanding somehow intuitively that even a bacteria, even a particle, and even thinking abstractly like a subatomic particle, like say an atom or a molecule, an atom, a subatomic particle, that all these things are living, that it is in a sense, without knowing physics, like we can say, and we can say this with the kind of understanding that comes to us just naturally, that even just a tiny grain of particle and all the subatomic and atomic and molecular mysteries that are alive, we understand that every molecule, every atom, every subatomic particle is spinning. Okay, and we kind of know that without knowing physics. It's kind of, I think we sort of have that intuition because we are incarnations of those things, and I think we understand that even matter itself is alive. I think time is alive. Time is a kind of a movement that we can't really perceive. It's sort of a washing. Time is a washing of the elements of space itself. And I think we sort of understand as we sit in timelessness, okay, as we sit just gazing at a landscape, okay, I think we understand we're being washed through with time and space, and that there is a living vibrancy just to existence without doing anything, just time itself, you know, and just space itself and the presentation of creation as a setting. I think that is for us, I think a sense of aliveness, a very like a cosmic life, basically, cosmic and meta cosmic life, basically. And so I think when we understand that sort of the miracle of creation, the miracle of the presentation of being itself, I think we understand that that is sort of the gift of the broadest perspective beyond particular spirits, beyond particular characters. You know what I mean? So it's sort of like the spiritual setting. And I think the Rockford Files does provide a very, very, very broad, very sort of large, sort of maximum panorama through the device of Rockford being abstracted from, like, say, being a regular person, and sort of that special environment of Southern California where it's almost like mountaintop panorama, basically. And that is one of the gifts, I think, of Southern California. And anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and really, and also I recommend anybody who likes the Rockford Files. It is not that hard. I found it's not that hard to find places on the internet where you can actually watch the Rockford Files. There's a website called archive.org. If it's not .org, I think it is. Anyway, it's like archive, basically internet archives. And you can find like all kinds of television shows and books and stuff, and you can watch the Rockford Files. It's not that hard to find. And I just invite people to, just enjoy the episodes, but just to think of some of the gifts of the '70s, the special sense of light and space that was, just it was a special sunshiny kind of a non-venomous patience. I think that was one of the gifts of the '70s. And just to enjoy the show and maybe not be too technical about it. But I'm going to go ahead and watch more episodes. I've watched all the episodes, but I'm going to watch them again, and I'm going to try to present, every few days, just different points of view, different sort of angles on the Rockford Files, kind of from what I think is sort of a spiritual perspective. And I think, for people who have, like, say, psychological problems, or people who struggle with personality or whatever, I think this show provides a lot of, I think, a very special genius perspective, where I think we can sort of try to sort out in our lives kind of maybe a different depth of values. as we struggle in life, because and by the way, life is not just enjoying a TV show. Life is also really giving of ourselves and really living the grind and living it to the max, and that can really be very challenging. So obviously easier when you have good values, so I think works of genius can help us with our values, our vision. And so I look forward to presenting more of these insights. Thanks for watching.